Hi there, welcome back to the Rehearsal Room. This is Nathan. We're excited to be diving back into Act 2 of this Hamlet project. We're going to start with Act 2, Scene 2, and we will finally meet the characters of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Hamlet's friends. And it's, as Annie just said before we started, it's the longest scene in the play, so there's a lot to get through. We'll only get through part of it in this series. And if you have missed anything, we just worked for the last couple weeks on Act 2, Scene 1. There's a lot going on between Polonius and Reynaldo and Polonius and Ophelia, and there's so many questions that it brings up. It was a lot of fun discussion, so I hope you check out those weeks as well. And if you want to support the project, there are links below to do that. Please feel free to leave comments. Of course, this play has sparked so much debate and discussion, so please feel free to join in. And hope you enjoy today's session. With that, I will turn it over to Annie.
Great. Right. Hi, everybody. I do want to start this session with just, again, a reference to the email that I sent out. Because one of the things that Randy and I are finding is we always, after these sessions, we always go back to how do we get past the idea of an actor working alone on a role and then losing communication with the other actor that he or she is playing with. And I think I've said this earlier, and I am just so convinced of it, that our work lives in our partner. So to start to look at this text, not from a sit outside scholarly perspective because when you pick up a script, let me start there. You pick up a script, you're an audience member. You're not an actor. And so you start to come to conclusions about characters. And before you know it, you pigeonhole them because that's made an impression on you. And that's who that character is. Polonius is a politician and he's funny. Hamlet is a guy who can't make up his mind. And all of a sudden, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Tweedledee and Tweedledum, all of this stuff. And it's been put in so many books, scholarly books. And so I think what's very difficult to do is to make the transition to acting it. And so we have to start to look at the text as an acting text. That's why I love the folio. The folio is put together by two members of Shakespeare's company. And so when you look at it, it's as close as we're going to get to how they acted it. The quarto comes before that. And the quarto is not the acting version, it was meant to be read. So when we look at as our work progresses, what I would like us to do is explore what did the character before I speak say, and how is that impacting what I say next? Because I think the trap that we've fallen into sometimes with Ophelia, and that's why I gave you that whole list of everybody's conjecture about it, is we put all of our attention on why was Hamlet there? Let's figure out why Hamlet was there, rather than what's going to fuel our play forward, move our play forward, and that's how Polonius and Ophelia react to it. And so I think that I want to make sure that when we're looking at it, examining the text, other than from, oh, here's what it means, the usual textual analysis, examine it with actors' eyes. When Polonius says, what said he? Well, he didn't say anything. And she doesn't say nothing. She starts to describe what happened in that room. And oftentimes actresses feel the obligation to show her emotional response to it. He took me by the hand and held me hard. Then he goes to the length of all his arm. But it's not about that. It's about Ophelia answering, what said he? And producing for Polonius the details of what happened in her chamber. And it gives us an idea, an opportunity to hear it, to hear very specifically. Once we start coding the script with a lot of emotional sound, and we do it because we say, well, this calls for emotion, I better show something, the detail goes away. We're going to find it not with Voltimand so much, because he's not terribly the most emotional character in the play, but what's being said. And how does it respond? And I'll show you more clearly as we move forward. But that's our work now. And a character says something. How is what I'm saying or what I'm doing come from what that character said, as opposed to how would Ophelia answer that in the world of Ophelia's? Does that make sense to everybody of the difference? Because I'm telling you, and Randy, you may want to address it too, but we have this conversation all the time. I mean, with his 150 years of experience, he still struggles with how do I say this and make it language that's human? How do I create a human character on stage? And I'm just going to assume that you guys struggle with that as well. But that's for me the work now. It's not so much pigeonholing, and I use that expression. That here's Polonius. I think it was Robert last week who said that he's Henry Kissinger, and he's not the only one. People like to make Polonius something, or Claudius. Look, the production they did in Central Park made Julius Caesar Trump. Well, then, okay, the experience is over. You just told us who Julius Caesar is to you. So I think, and I think that's a natural kind of thing to happen because we tend to look at a play from the outside as the audience member. Stanislavski said, when you read a play, you should sit down, have a nice glass of vodka, sit in a private room all by yourself, and read the play so that you understand what impressions are being made on you, because it's the closest you will ever come and the last time you will ever come to being an audience member. From that point, it's over. You know the play. But knowing the play allows us to move to our work, and that's acting the play. Okay? All right. So I wanted to go through that because I think that's where we're going to find tremendous discoveries in this text. And I think that if you can stay away from the assumption that it's this or absolutes, I would really beg of you to be careful of this is it and it can be nothing else. Because like all great art, there's a mystery. All great art allows the person viewing it to participate in it. That's what art is. It allows you, it gives your soul a chance to be involved. It does not say this is what it is. Now you can all go home, give a thumbs up, thumbs down, or write a review. That's not what art is. And I would fight with anybody to deny Shakespeare his place as one of the greatest artists in the world or the world has ever known. All right? So what I'd like to, well, I'm sorry, I talk so much. If anybody has anything to say or feelings about that or anything from what I wrote in that email, this is the time to do it, because then we're going to jump right into that Polonius and Ophelia scene. Anything? No, nothing. Okay. All right. So let's move forward. Sharon, I'm going to ask you to do Ophelia. Is that good? You're good with that? Okay. And Michele, I'm going to ask you to do Polonius. Okay. And so we'll take it from her entrance, Ophelia's entrance.
And do we continue with the next scene, Annie? Immediately upon that?
No, not this time.
Oh, okay.
Not right. Oh, wait,
Okay.
Randy, maybe we should, and then we can go back and discuss all of it. Let's do that.
Okay.
Let's continue. So then you'll do Claudius
Yeah.
and Terry. Would you do the Queen? And Nick's going to do Guildenstern. And Sarah, would you do Rosencrantz? Okay, and I think that's everybody, right? Okay.
Oh, you're muted, Michele. I saw your lips moving, but I'm like, I don't know where she is.
Yeah, that's fine. How now, Ophelia? What's the matter?
Alas, my lord, I have been so affrighted.
With what in the name of heaven?
My lord, as I was sewing in my chamber, Lord Hamlet, doublet all unbraced, no hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered, and down give to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and with a look so piteous in purport, as if he had been loosed out of hell to speak of horrors, he comes before me.
Mad for thy love?
My lord, I do not know, but truly I do fear it.
What said he?
He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all his arm, and with his other hand thus o'er his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face as he would draw it. Long stayed he so, at last a little shaking of mine arm, and thrice his head thus waving up and down, he raised a sigh, so piteous and profound that it did seem to shatter all his bulk and end his being. That done, he lets me go. And with his head o'er his shoulders turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes. For out of doors he went without their help, and to the last bended their light on me.
Go with me. I will go seek the king. This is the very ecstasy of love, whose violent property foredoes itself and leads the will to desperate undertakings, as oft as any passion under heaven that does afflict our natures. I am sorry. What have you given him any hard words of late?
No, my good lord, but as you did command, I did repel his letters and denied his access to me.
That hath made him mad. I am sorry that with better speed and judgment I had not quoted him. I fear he did but trifle and meant to rack thee, but beshrew my jealousy. It seems it is as proper to our age to cast beyond ourselves in our opinions, as it is common for the younger sort to lack discretion. Come, go we to the king. This must be known. We keeping close might move more grief to hide than hate to utter love.
Welcome, dear Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Moreover, that we much did long to see you, the need we have to use you did provoke our hasty sending. Something have you heard of Hamlet's transformation, so I call it, since not the exterior nor the inward man resembles what it was. What it should be more than his father's death, that thus hath put him so much from the understanding of himself, I cannot deem of. I entreat you both, that being of so young days brought up with him, and since so neighboured to his youth and humour, that you vouchsafe your rest here in our court some little time, so by your companies to draw him on to pleasures, and to gather so much as from occasions you may glean, that opened lies within our remedy.
Good gentleman, he hath much talked of you, and sure I am, 2 men there are not living to whom he more adheres. If it will please you to show us so much gentry and goodwill as to expend your time with us a while for the supply and profit of our hope, your visitation shall receive such thanks as fits a king's remembrance.
Both your majesties might, by the sovereign power you have of us, put your dread pleasures more into command than to entreaty.
We both obey, and here give up ourselves, in the full bent, to lay our services freely at your feet, to be commanded.
Thanks, Rosencrantz, and gentle Guildenstern.
Thanks, Guildenstern and gentle Rosencrantz. And I beseech you, instantly to visit my too much changed son. Go some of ye, and bring the gentleman where Hamlet is.
Heavens make our presence and our practices pleasant and helpful to him.
Amen.
Okay. Sharon, come on back. Let's just talk a little bit, and let me say that I appreciate you're following a lot of what I said about not over emoting on Ophelia.
Mm.
One of the things I want to point out is that if you look at her first description of what he looked like, it's all comma pretty much.
Mhm.
So that will link to, my Lord, I have been so affrighted. And
Mhm.
he says, why in the name of heaven? That's your place for the answer to why you have been affrighted. And that's where you can infuse that with the thing that made you afraid, as opposed to just a description of
Mhm.
what he looked like. Now, when you get to the next section, and he says, what said he? What I want you to think about, and see if this makes sense to you. What I'm hearing is you describing what happened. I need you to remember it, because I need you to answer the question he's asking is, what said he? You see how that's a short line, and here's where my wonderful scansion people can jump in. What said he? It's almost as if Ophelia needs to go back into that room and see it, rather than it's so ingrained in her that she can rattle, you weren't rattling, but you can one image after another. I think because you have more punctuation, by the way, in that speech
Mhm.
than in those commas, to actually remember what happened. Take your first line. In fact, if Michele, can you give her the cue first of what said he?
Right now?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
What said he?
Take time to think, Sharon. And now.
He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all his arm. With his other hand, thus o'er his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face as he would draw it.
Period. Now change.
Long stayed he so. At last a little shaking of mine arm, and thrice his head thus waving up and down. He raised a sigh, so piteous and profound, that it did seem to shatter all his bulk and end his being. That done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulders turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes, for out of doors he went without their help, and to the last bended their light on me.
Go with me. I will go seek the king.
And hold for a second, because that's what we're doing now is how she describes, how she I'm going to say remembers rather than describes. And it's unfolded for you, Polonius, as she is remembering it. You're back in the room. That's why I think I told you Julia Marlowe did it on her Polonius. She took him by the wrist so she could recreate what happened. And the Polonius was so startled by it that he realized, oh, that's what this is. But whatever it is that Ophelia is remembering puts you back in the room, Ophelia, but it now allows Polonius to be in that room too. And so when he says, go with me, it's because you have seen what she saw. Do you see what I mean? It's not just because he's Polonius and he's a funny kind of guy and that's how he would react to anything. You're not doing that way. But a lot of productions do. He answers so quickly that I never see that what she said is what provokes him to come to the final conclusion. This is terrible. You are reading into this the very thing you're going to bring to Claudius.
Mm.
And we have to have that acted out on stage. Otherwise, it's just emotion and language, you know? And I think for Ophelia also, when she says, I don't know, but I fear it, because she can't, you don't know, we don't know, everybody has an idea about it, but it is odd behavior. So you do want to remember it. He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all his arm. And that, it is remembering. Give your time, give yourself time to see, it, and then speak it. And we're rehearsing it. Looking for a final product. I'm looking to show how this scene or this action between these two characters has a direct influence on how Polonius will present this to Claudius, as opposed to mad for thy love. And he's made up his mind, and Ophelia, we can leave her lines because it doesn't much matter. He's already decided. And that's what people do with Shakespeare. Well, just cut that. I mean, we don't need those lines, get rid of them. But if you start to see that what the importance of this is her going into that room. That's why I think when she says, oh, and then he put his hand over his eye, he fell to such perusal of my face that he would draw it. Period. Long stayed he so. At last a little shaking of my arm. And I'm, it's kind of a bad version of remembering, but I think as the actor, you got to try, you've got to find your way there, because as you do that, you're painting a picture for the audience. They will see, not only will they see the behavior, they're filled with expectations of the Hamlet we're about to meet the next time we see him. And that's filled with its own surprises. But we leave the scene with Polonius convinced that this is the issue here. And not only in the whole line about so piteous in purport, as he been loosed out of hell, that or anything that refers to him letting that sigh out, that has the impact on Polonius is this is dangerous. This is not just somebody who's lovesick. This is somebody who might commit suicide. And that's why it's important for me to get to this king, because the consequences of that are more dire than my feeling that you're beneath his station and so you should just stay out of, don't see him, don't answer, because you don't have a chance of the king accepting you for his bride. But now the stakes have been raised. Now the stakes are, he didn't mean to just rack you. He didn't mean to just screw you. This is something that is deep in him and can cause more harm than me keeping my mouth shut and keeping it and telling you just to end it. Do you see what I'm saying? It's all connected. It's all connected. And so as we move to the next scene, and Polonius, you're going to bring this information in, and you're going to now the next scene, not the exact next scene, but when we see you again, your description is going to be a little bit different than what Ophelia presented. But it doesn't take away the idea that you have come to the conclusion that he is mad for her. The lack of having her has made him crazy, and that's dangerous. All right, does that make sense, right, to everybody? Okay. Okay, so now we're at the end of the scene and we're thinking, okay, let's see Hamlet. Can't wait. And what do we see? Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. We have to wait again. This play, we talked about that in Act 1. Our expectations are built and built and built, and then they're put on hold. But they will continue to build until we see Hamlet, and we won't see him for a while. In fact, I don't think we'll see him before Christmas in this session.
And that kind of echoes what happens in Act 1.
Exactly. Exactly. Now we're seeing how the play is structured. You know, this is again, we think that Shakespeare's a magnificent wordsmith, that he's a great understanding of human behavior. He's also a technician. He knows how to construct a play. He knows how to put a play on stage. It's not accidental. You know, he gives time for entrances. You can see in everything that he writes, it's well thought out. These people were players, not scholars, not men of literature. We turned it into literature, but they were players. They were actors who knew the stagecraft. And so that's why I think you can start to see, okay, what this is about is building expectations. And every time we're put on hold, you know, Michele, we were put on hold with Polonius and Laertes in the first act. And once again, we're back to Polonius and Reynaldo in this. And at the end of this now, we're introducing two new characters completely, you know? So, but it keeps us excited about, from the moment that we heard Hamlet, the ghost meeting Hamlet, and Hamlet swearing to follow whatever the ghost has asked for, that's what we're waiting for. That's what the play is. It's a tragedy of Hamlet, you know, and that's what we're waiting for. And every single time our anticipation builds and builds and builds. And that's the way he's structured it. So now let's bring in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. This is and I know Robert Dewar is going to love this because he and I are the same crazed research train. But I will say to you that I did some research on Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and I found out that in the 16th century, two of the most prominent families in Denmark were the Rosencrantzes and the Guildensterns. And Rosencrantz's mother was married to a Guildenstern. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were cousins. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern visited England in 1592. There's a record of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern studying at Wittenberg. What's the importance of all of that? How can you use it in acting other than thinking, wow, how did Shakespeare know that? Or did he? There are actual people who think that perhaps he knew a Rosencrantz and a Guildenstern. What it does for me is many times when the play is done, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are depicted as two poorer members of the court or of Danish, two poor Danish people. They're dressed down. I think what we're learning here is these two men are of nobility. The other thing that's interesting about this, they have Danish names. Claudius goes to 2 Danes. 2 Danes have the duty to pay allegiance to Claudius. Horatio's not a Dane. Horatio's not called as Hamlet's best friend or friend of Hamlet. Later on, we'll learn that Gertrude does know Horatio. So here they bring in 2 school friends, but here's the thing. When did they go to school with him? And if they were that close to the family, why weren't they at the funeral? Why weren't they at the wedding? So all of a sudden, there's a question about their relationship with Hamlet, although the king and queen make it sound like they're the best friends Hamlet could ever have. When we get into the next scene, you'll see in the folio these wonderful question marks where Rosencrantz will say, "My good lord." And you know how we are, at many of us at this age, and we see somebody and we think, "Jim, is that you?" Because there's been distance. They were young schoolmates of Hamlet. So I think that's just, again, food for thought. But my feeling is, if you're dressing this production to allow them to be members of the gentleman class, the nobility. And then, of course, when you start to think further about it, the poor little urchins are not going to go to a school where the royal prince is attending, and they're not going to just be called into the court. They have to be something of a kind of gentry that the court feels that they can depend on to do the task that they have to do. All right? So that's the Rosencrantz and Guild. The other thing about them, they're often played like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They're interchangeable. There's no difference between them. I would say pay close attention to how they respond to things. But let's look at Claudius for a moment before we even get there. "Dear Rosencrantz and Guildenstern," and he says, "moreover, that we long to see you, the need we have to use you, is more important." So he's presenting that. That's a kind of, and not the friendliest greeting of someone that you've been longing to see for a long time. He gets to the point of, "We're going to use you." Then he says, "Something you've heard of Hamlet's transformation. How did they hear it? Is it public knowledge that Hamlet has changed? How did they hear it?" But you start to look at Claudius's speech. He almost gives too much information away. What it could be more than his father's death, I have no idea. Well, why does he have to share that? And he actually ends it with, "We hope that you'll spend time here and find out what's troubling him." There's nothing direct about what he's asking them to do. Now, take a look, and I was talking to Jim and I worked on Sunday. This is just something that bugs me, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to work this. All of the things that have been said about Claudius by the king, by Hamlet, I think it's inherent in his speeches that he's not quite kingly. That it's almost like somebody who wears a coat that's too big for him. And that's why we always have Gertrude coming in, who has been queen, who is comfortable with dealing with members of noble class and being a ruler herself. If you look at just the slight difference between the two, that when she says, "Good gentlemen," she's not familiar with them. She doesn't say Rosencrantz. She says, "Good gentlemen. He has much talked of you." Has he? We don't know. When did he do that? There's no scene to let us know that, right? And she says, "There's no one that we could think of that could be closer." But here's what she adds to her speech. She adds that if you will do us the, the privilege of staying with us and entertaining or finding out what's wrong with Hamlet, we'll give you something that is very worth a king's remembrance. She's added money, jewel, whatever it is, she's added it to her plea at the end. The important thing also, we entreat you, Claudia says. They're begging them. They're asking them. They're king and queen. Why do they have to plead? And that's where Rosencrantz comes in. And Rosencrantz hears it and he sees it and he says, both of you being king and queen could command us to do what you want rather than entreating us to do it. Now, here's the thing. In the quarto, Guildenstern's response is, but. There's a tiny but in the quarto that's not in the folio. We obey, Nick, we obey is what? But we obey.
We will, yeah, we obey. We both obey.
Both obey. But here's the thing, and I think, again, you have a short line at the end of Rosencrantz. You almost feel Guildenstern pop in so Rosencrantz doesn't screw this whole thing up by suggesting something that should not have been suggested, like, why are you doing this? You guys are king. Why would you bother to do that? He comes right in and he says, we will do it and we will give ourselves totally over to it. So we start to see, even in this little scene, the difference between Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And you can count on it. You're going to see it as we move through the play. Guildenstern will always be a little, I don't want to say craftier, I can't really, but he's the one who's going to carry this thing through the end. There's almost a naivete in Rosencrantz in the way he asks questions and the way he responds to things throughout the course of their journey in the play. So we have two different people dealing with the situation at hand differently. Okay? The only other thing I want to point out that troubles me is Guildenstern's word practices. They are presence and are practices. What does he mean by that?
Well, it could mean behavior, but practices is also a deceptive behavior. So it's got a double meaning.
It does. And that's where I think, too, Liz, that you'll find, even in Claudius's, that's why I say when he says the need we have to use you, it can be innocent, but there's something almost subconscious about the need we have to use you, that because it can be both, it's there. It's not so that Randy plays it and he hits it over the head, but again, if you allow what the character's saying to be clear, to make sure that even if it's two meanings, you know both, then you'll find that all of a sudden the speech will take on a life that sometimes it doesn't, because sometimes, again, it's a speech that basically says, nice to see you guys. You have a great, you were with Hamlet for a long time and we love having you here and we want you to do this. It's not that simple, because here's another thing, when these characters speak, they reveal themselves. They reveal their discomfort. They reveal their subliminal feelings. They reveal the way they speak. It reveals something about them as well as what they're saying to the person to whom they're speaking. Very exciting. I mean, I think it's just very exciting because you can't take any of it for granted. You can't just toss this stuff off. You have to ask yourself, what does Claudius want from these guys? What does he want, and how is he going to present what he wants to them? And why does Gertrude come in at the end of it? Randy pointed out something to me, because this has always been a thing about thanks Rosencrantz and gentle Guildenstern, and thanks Guildenstern. that she corrects him. And I've read some of my reading finds that it's become kind of hackneyed, that it's done so often that it's sort of not, just doesn't hold the power it once did as a new idea. Although Randy had pointed out, and I thought this is again, looking at the script, it's Guildenstern who speaks last. And the king says, "Thanks, Rosencrantz." So just maybe he doesn't know the difference. And again, he got it from seeing who spoke last, rather than saying, well, it's off the cuff, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, but he connected it. He connected it to the character who last spoke, and all of a sudden it made more sense for her to kind of, get the record clean on who they are. This is all stuff, there are no absolutes, but it's all about how can we bring it to life, and how do we show that everything's connected in this play. Nothing just stands out because Shakespeare happened to like the speech he wrote. It doesn't work that way. It's connected. You have to ask yourself, why would a play stay famous for over 400 years? Why does every actor worth his salt feel, I have to play Hamlet? It's the test ground for Hamlet. Why do audiences come back to it time and time again? That's not luck. That's because it is a great play, not just a great character, not just a couple of great speeches, a great play. And I think the thing that I'm learning being with you folks is the reason it's great is because you don't take anything for granted. And here's the thing, after I've said all of this, now we have to throw it all away because you can't hit it over the head. You can't hold up a sign. You can't say this or that, but you want it all to stimulate your imagination and the circumstances of the piece so that you can play it. And the audience is free to take that in. You do all this work, all this examining, all of it, let alone working on your body, working on your voice, all this stuff that we've, done our whole lives. And then you have to be able to simply go on stage and act it, play it. Okay? Any other observations about the text itself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wondered, I just noticed when the king, Claudius, when he says that being of so young days brought up with him, maybe they haven't seen them for a long time. They used to hang around the court. Because if we can go back to what we discovered earlier on, that Hamlet, we were sort of accepting that Hamlet is likely to be the 30, as mentioned in the graveyard scene, not 18. So it's a distant thing. And perhaps Claudius wasn't around much then. He wasn't the king then.
Yes, I agree with you. That's
There is
right.
a distance there that occurs to me. And there's one other thing that always bothers me. The only thing in what Ophelia describes that sort of gives you the creeps is his stockings fouled and down jiveted to his eye. All the other stuff could be explained in a zillion ways. That is freaky.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that begs the question, I think.
Yes, I was reading the other day also, though, and I think it was John Dover Wilson, who I'm not, I don't, it was one of them, was Grabanier but at any rate, what he said was the key. I'm sure it was Wilson. The one of the things that she says in that section that throws it off from being a rejected lover is his knees knocking each other, and that is a sign of somebody who's in terror, somebody who's terribly frightened, and that would not be a sign of rejected love. And so he used that as his argument for now Polonius reads into it, but he used it as this understanding that somehow Hamlet was trying to come to her after his trauma with the ghost, the connection with the ghost, knees knocking each other, and as if he had been loosed out of hell, to speak of horrors. it seems very much a description of what we saw when Hamlet encountered the ghost. I don't know what you do with it. Again, it's that kind of information that it's very, very hard to come to a final conclusion of that this is what this is what he was doing. But it has troubled her. It has troubled her. She does not come in and say, he you know, I do know he's in love with me. You should have let me. That's not her point is I do. She comes in terrified. My Lord, I've been so affrighted. That's her response to it. And then she goes on to the description that you're talking about. And it is that particular section you're pointing out. I agree with you. It's a fouled and downjived. You know, the picture of it, you know, we struggled when we did the production at APT, we struggled about how much of that do you bring in to the scene when he's reading, when we finally see Hamlet again. Do you leave him in the disarray that she describes? And does he go through that all the way through how all occasions do inform against me? But those decisions have to be made. And I think you pointed out, Liz, also that Claudius says neither the inside or the outside is what it was. So something has changed physically as well. And that starts to determine how do we dress him when we see him next.
I think it goes all the way back to his seams, madam, when he himself recognizes and says publicly that these are but the trappings of woe and mourning and grief. And he's a prince, he has his hat, he has his black on, you know, looks pretty spiffy. But this other description is somebody who's totally neglected appearance. You know, so I think when I did it, I had my stockings down jived, you know, bare-legged, and carried that through. The play's the thing. And then the night of the play, you know, tidied up a little bit to be, but to try to fulfill Ophelia's description.
Yep.
And I think neglect is an important part of his emotional state anyway, after seeing the ghost. He's well aware of what appearances are, you know, and can speak truthfully and people will take him as crazy. Can speak honestly, and that's part of a madman speaking, you know. Perhaps.
Yeah, there's that perhaps again, right?
Yes, always.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
What I'd like to do is to read it all again. Let's change the cast up a little bit. Ben, while I have you, can you do Claudius? And let me open this up. Who would like to try the Ophelia speech? Yeah, Michele, okay. And let's see. Jim, could you do Polonius for us? All right, and what do we have? Oh, Liz Guildenstern. Nick, why don't we just mix it up, Rosencrantz? Okay, and do we need a Gertrude, right? Right?
Yes.
We need a Gertrude, huh? Let me say, you know, Liz, let me switch it. I'm sorry. Could you do Gertrude for us?
I'll do Gertrude.
And
Pages.
then Stephen, can you do Rosencrantz for us?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh God, I'm trying to find my pages. Hold on. Patient. I'm in such a muddle here. We've done the Reynaldo scene. That's gone.
That's right.
Okay. Okay, I'm good. I'm good.
Jim, are you muted?
I apologize. Do I have the first line? I guess I do. Are we ready? How now, Ophelia? What's the matter?
Alas, my lord, I have been so affrighted.
With what in the name of heaven?
My lord, as I was sewing in my chamber, Lord Hamlet, with his doublet all unbraced, no hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered, and down-gyved to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and with a look so piteous in purport, as if it had been loosed and loosed out of hell, to speak of horrors. He comes before me.
Mad for thy love?
My lord, I do not know, but truly I do fear it.
What said he?
He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all his arm, and with his other hand thus o'er his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face as he would draw it. Long stayed he so. At last a little shaking of mine arm, and thrice his head thus waving up and down, he raised a sigh so piteous and profound that it did seem to shatter all his bulk and end his being. That done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulders turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes. For out of doors he went without their help, and to the last bended their light on me.
Go with me, I will go seek the king. This is the very ecstasy of love, whose violent property fordoes itself and leads the will to desperate undertakings as oft as any passion under heaven that does afflict our natures. I am sorry. What? Have you given him any hard words of late?
No, my good lord. But as you did command, I did repel his letters and denied his access to me.
That hath made him mad. I am sorry that with better speed and judgment I had not quoted him. I fear he did but trifle and meant to rack thee. But beshrew my eyes, it seems as it is proper to our age to cast beyond ourselves and our opinions, as it is common for the younger sort to lack discretion. Come, go we to the king. This must be known, which being kept close might move more grief to hide than hate to utter love.
Welcome, dear Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Moreover, that we much did long to see you, the need we have to use you did provoke our hasty sending. Something have you heard of Hamlet's transformation? So I call it, since neither the exterior nor the inward man resembles what it was. What it should be, more than his father's death that thus have put him so much from the understanding of himself, I cannot dream of. I entreat you both, that being of so young days brought up with him, and since so neighbored to his youth and humor, that you vouchsafe your rest here in our court some little time, so by your companies to draw him on to pleasures, and to gather so much as from occasions you may glean, that opened lies within our remedy.
Good gentleman, he hath much talked of you, and sure I am, two men there are not living to whom he more adheres. If it will please you to show us so much gentry and goodwill as to expend your time with us a while, for the supply and profit of our hope, Your visitation shall receive such thanks as fits a king's remembrance.
Both your majesties might, by the sovereign power you have of us, put your dread pleasures more into command than to entreaty.
We both obey, and here give up ourselves in the full bent to lay our services freely at your feet, to be commanded.
Thanks, Rosencrantz and gentle Guildenstern.
Thanks, Guildenstern, and gentle Rosencrantz. And I beseech you instantly to visit my too much changed son. Go, some of ye, and bring the gentleman where Hamlet is.
Heavens make our presence and our practices pleasant and helpful to him.
Amen.
You see how many times the beseech and entreat, and this is important to them. You know, we talked about Fortinbras invading Denmark. We talk about all of these people keeping the watch, not knowing why, but there's this outside threat. And that's one of the reasons that we had to marry early, because we needed a king on the throne. All of that. And now what is our major concern? Hamlet and the change in Hamlet. So I'm so struck that time with, even at the end, with Gertrude. And I beseech you, here's where we've got to not, I don't want you to feel like you have to hit a word or color it particularly strong, but somehow when you understand that there's a difference between I command you and I beseech you, there's an action behind the word. And listen, it's all a process. You have to be able to do it. It's just the folio. I've often been asked to teach the folio, you know, in an hour or 2 hours. And a folio is a lifelong commitment, because it's not just, first you have to learn the basics of it. So you hit things hard, you pull words out, you do all of that. Then you have to find the interpretive quality of it. You can't just, you know, I think you'll say this about scansion too, to-tump, to-tump, to-tump. There's nothing, it doesn't go anywhere. That's not what it's about. Now we have this, we have to take a look at words. At APT, one of the things we did, if you guys remember, and I'll share it with new people, we looked up every word. I have texts where every if, and but was looked up, because we had to know what we were saying. And it wasn't just a kind of paraphrasing. We did that as a tool, but it was, what does it mean when somebody entreats, somebody says beseech, somebody says I beg? We in today's society feel totally comfortable saying, I beg you don't do that. It's very rare that we put beg and beg. But we don't do that with any of our language. We've flatlined language almost completely. But here, that doesn't work that way. It's an action that comes. The word lives in an action. And that will give you the clue as to what the character is doing. But you have to acknowledge it. You can't just look at it as oh, beseech. That's big. When was the last time you guys beseeched somebody? You know? And what did you do when you did it? When you begged somebody? Well, we'd throw that away. We don't find it in ourselves. And so what I found, and I thought I found the reading of it was bringing that to me. All of a sudden, those words started to take on meaning. Ben, Liz, you know, when you said, I beseech you, it rang off the page from me. And that doesn't mean that you say, I beseech you. It just means that it has a life in that. These people are entreating these men to do something that they can order them to do. They are putting themselves in a position that's lower than these men to get them to do what they want. That's interesting to me, because that's how they feel that they can somehow get this to happen. And that's why I think Rosencrantz knows it right away. You guys should not be you don't have to entreat me. You could order me to do it. And I would say I want so much for that but to be in there. And it finishes the line. It makes it 10. Yeah.
Where does the but come? But we both obey? Is that what it is?
Yeah. And I think if you count it out, Liz, I think you'll see that's a complete line. It makes it the 10, it makes.
Exactly. It does.
And so I feel that it does two things. It makes him butt in, if you accept that, to kind of, get in there before Rosencrantz says anything else. And it also finishes a line, which I think it feels like it's right. Randy and I were talking about it today, is that he said to me, are we going to change words? Because we told you that the quarto and the folio, and you have two quartos to deal with. One, the first quarto is known as the bad quarto. Quarto 2 is the one that people rely on, but they always do a kind of compilation with folio and quarto. I don't have a problem with one word. I don't have what I don't want to do if we're committed to the folio is to take full speeches, because we feel, oh, that's too good a speech to let go. If you're doing the folio, then I would say stick with that. But I wouldn't be as crazy enough to say that but is going to make it a huge difference, particularly when it helps. You're going to find also there are times in the folio that a word will be used, and our rule of thumb was, if it didn't make sense in the line, we would go to the quarto, and if the quarto had a different word that helped the sense, we would accept that, because it can be a printer's error. It can be, this stuff was not, it's not a sophisticated printing world that we live in. So that's kind of the way we work those choices. So in this case, I think that, all of this to say but I think that it really does bring a different quality to the moment. Yeah. Ben, did you discover anything about Claudius that you want to?
It just made me wonder, is that, this is the first real action that seems like is being taken. It just made me wonder, is this a Gertrude idea? It seems like this is probably a Gertrude idea. Gertrude probably knew them. Sorry if I'm repeating things that might have gotten talked about before I hopped on here. It made me wonder, does the king know these guys at all? Is this a Gertrude idea? Like, we had to do something about it. We know it's been a couple of months, and it seems like, so clearly we sent away, it took them a while to get here. I was also just thinking, in a weird way, this is as good as it gets for Claudius. This is as good as it gets for him in the play. He should stop right now. He's about to get the good news from Norway, and he should call it quits right about now. But that's just what I was thinking about, was there is so much entreaty in this. It feels like I'm a little bit like I'm trying to fulfill my wife's idea about what we should do for her son. This feels stepdaddy a little bit. I've got to do the stepdad thing and try to make this right a little bit. I don't know. That's what I was thinking about, because it is, the king doesn't try to have any power in this scene. He's just very, he's a facilitator in this scene. He doesn't,
Ben,
not very flexy.
Yeah. Ben, is there a possibility that this is the beginning of a suspicion that there may be something more going on in his nephew? Just the death of his father.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's
you know
good
what
too.
I mean?
Yeah.
You're harboring a secret murder.
Yeah.
You carry that. So is this maybe the beginning that something more may be going on with the young man?
And I think it's
perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think actually, no, Randy. Well, what a big surprise. I think that you are absolutely right on that one, because I was actually thinking about the part we haven't gotten to yet. Where Polonius comes in and then says, I think it's love. And then, and Claudius being a little, oh, really? You know, oh, maybe I didn't. Yeah, I think there's something that's what you just said is certainly a more playable thing to play.
Mm,
You know, it's a more interesting.
yeah.
And I want
Perhaps.
to point out something also. If you remember, let's go back to Act 1 for a minute. Do you remember when Claudia said, "For all our thanks"? Both Gertrude and Claudius have, they've done something that the court, even though they're keeping quiet about it, is not approved. It's not, that mourning should have been longer. That marriage is incestuous. So the way they are viewed, they carry that with them through the course. So the idea of them being kind to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, so the lady doth protest too much, is that the feeling is we are a good king and queen, and we take care of our subjects, and because that'll take any suspicion away from that, not the murder. I don't think we're even at the murder yet. I think we're still at Hamlet, a little different for Claudius, but Gertrude's going to say in the next scene, I think it no other than his father's death and our hasty marriage. She doesn't think that the madness is going to lead to, or his disarray is anything other than that. Claudius may, but Claudius is still a little bit different. Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to say, I think that almost all the characters in the play are carrying some kind of guilty feeling with them, that they've done something. Ophelia, too, has denied Hamlet, and, maybe not Polonius, but everybody has some guilt. And, when you feel guilty about something, it just rides in your subconscious and everything gets viewed from that point of view. So, yeah, I think they're all bearing that and,
Yeah,
trying to cope.
but I think that now for me, Ben, that if in looking at, and everyone in looking at Claudius, because Jim and I had talked about it earlier, and I was saying to Jim that it felt like he wasn't confident in being a king, and now I think today the next discovery is that it's not about that so much as it is showing what a loving king he is by calling them by their first names to start with, to say that we long to see you, and sharing with them. I can't imagine what it could be, and if you would spend time with, this is what a wonderful king to follow. And the same thing, and Gertrude also comes to bring that into play when she says, we will reward you. So there are two, when we're watching it now, and I think when we're watching it now, there is no suspicion. There's no suspicion. They're entreating. Again, they don't have to. And Rosencrantz brings it up. But again, for them to be able to ingratiate themselves to these two men that they haven't seen and they want something from, it to me, all of a sudden, I was struck with, oh, wait a minute, this is them. They have to spend, talk about guilt, Terry, they have to spend their king and queenship constantly proving that they are deserving of it, and get everybody to forget about what shouldn't have been. That as a possibility. I just want to put that out there. And it's a way to look at it, I think, when you read it again, to somehow play with it in a way that you say, welcome, dear Rosencrantz. That dear is long spelling. Welcome, dear Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Moreover, that we long to see you. The need we have to use this wonderful, wonderful man who is almost embracing them, And the same thing with her. She follows through. I don't think there are two men in the world who he thinks higher of. Maybe we're on to something. Again, this is where you crave rehearsal.
Yeah.
So we can just get up on
Because mustn't forget what they're asking of these two men.
Right.
They're to find out, they're to glean information of what's going on with the prince.
Not the spying situation.
Yeah.
But how wonderful to present it in a way that
Of course.
call attention to it.
Of course.
No?
Well, and then and the best answer would be that it is just that he's having trouble with it. I mean, that is the, at least from the Claudius, but because it isn't all that Claudius wants in some ways is like the badness is over and I can and people have accepted and we can move on. I don't want to,
Absolutely.
and just the best thing that could happen is his old friends show up. They get him drunk a couple times. He gets back to his old self. And everything starts being good, and we can move forward. I don't have to be a bad guy anymore, right? I mean, isn't that sort of the villain's hope, right? In some ways, is I'm done sinning, I can move forward, and these guys, hopefully will just smooth the waters out or something.
But what you're bringing up is also great, because now we understand why it's a problem to have Hamlet disarray and looking like he, that he might be on madness. Now the attention is back. It's not on what a wonderful kingship and how I take care of. Now Hamlet is a sore thumb in this. What happens if the public finds out that the prince is roaming around and he's mad, or questions start. Remember later on in the play when Ophelia is mad and she's in the streets and Horatio says she needs to be talked to because she is strewing conjectures, and people are pointing at her saying, oh, there's something behind it. And so Hamlet sort of takes the life out of the joy of this king and queen and everything's okay now and we can move forward as a possibility. Again, it's not so much. I would avoid Claudius's feeling that Hamlet knows something about the murder. I would hold away from that because there's no reason why he would. There's nothing that said he hasn't seen the ghost. The ghost hasn't visited him. But the fact that Hamlet is a distraction somehow, why is he mad, needs to be found out. She believes that it's the situation at hand, the hasty marriage, and his mourning for his father. Claudius seems to suggest there's something else, but he doesn't suggest what it is. And that, again, remember, keeps us excited about moving forward. And that's why Polonius coming in now will introduce something. We'll introduce something about that very thing that Claudius is really concerned about. Okay.
It reminds me, Annie, just going back to the very first scene with I keep thinking Claudius's big mistake, besides obviously killing his brother, is that he should have let Hamlet go back to school. But we were talking about that the thing that the idea that he is a usurper and keeping Hamlet close is probably the idea. And so that I think about that as being, because I think you're right. I think that the idea that there's no way Hamlet could know about the murder, but Hamlet could be brewing something. This behavior could be because he wants, and isn't that the original story, Annie? I'm sorry, the original myth, isn't that, he's just biding time, acting crazy so he can revenge, right? And I mean,
brought it
or
up
he could take the throne back.
Because being mad, he decides the safest thing to do. He's talking about Saxo Grammaticus or the Belleforest story. That character puts on madness to protect him, so no one is suspicious of the thing that he's doing. So to suggest that Hamlet's putting on this madness because it's going to help make him, it's going to make everybody in the place suspicious, I think we're jumping ahead of something that is not it. As I said, what I would do is go along with he's acting strangely. And as Terry said, everybody has guilt that they're carrying, so something's bubbling up in them of what might be and what might not be. But I think you're right, Ben. There's another element to this besides the murder, and that is Hamlet is the rightful heir to the throne. And the idea that Fortinbras has put together men to come and get back the lands he believes belong to his father, all of that, this idea that young people who have a reason to rebel can cause a rebellion. So it doesn't have to be the murder. It can just be that Hamlet left that scene. If you remember that scene 2, Hamlet only says, I shall in all my best obey you, madam. He does not say that to Claudius, and that's why she has to come in. So Claudius is left with Hamlet not giving over to him. he gives over to the mother, and then Claudius turns it into, it's a loving and a fair reply. Be as ourselves. He turns it into something, but does it leave an undercurrent of this is not, he's still not over it. There's something else happening here. Yeah.
Mm.
Good. Hold on. I want to just go back for a minute to Polonius, if you don't mind, and Ophelia. Jim, I think that one of the things that you bring to your Polonius a kind of robust, I don't know, see if I'm right, is that there's a kind of suspicious jumping to conclusion Polonius that you bring to him. What I'm going to suggest to you is that when Ophelia gives a description, take it in. This hath made him, come, go with me. Allow him to not be the effusive jumping to conclusion. Because remember, he has just said, I'm sorry. And he talks about how old people, jump to conclusions the same way young people lack discretion. And I think that we need to see Polonius make the discovery that he jumped to something too soon. And it's from her description that you see there's something here that's different than him wanting to ruin her, rack her, have sex with her, whatever, that you told her earlier. And so I think what has to happen is, and I think what becomes interesting is, Polonius is changed by this. We have to see that change. Otherwise, the same Polonius who we see with Reynaldo, and it becomes a pattern of give him this money and these notes, Reynaldo, and don't, and Reynaldo, and you want to. I would urge you to not throw all of that in so quickly. I would say to you, when you say mad for thy love, what said he? And then she gives that description. Take it in, so that the conclusion is, we have to go to the king. This is dire. And so we see that Polonius is not just a foolish old man in every decision he makes, that he too changes through the course of the play. Does that make sense to you?
I'm not sure.
Huh?
What was I doing that made you feel that I was?
What you did was, Bear, you would say, come, go with us. This hath made him. This energy was the same energy that you gave to the beginning of the scene. So I didn't see the change in him. The change that says go. Look at that GOE. Go with us. I will to the king. That we have to hear that that's a decision you never would have made until she gave that description. And that calls for a more sober, I don't know if that's the right word, but a more serious Polonius in that moment.
So what I was doing was saying, now I've got it. That's why he's mad. You don't want that. Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't hear that. What I heard was a kind of energy of, that's what it just burst out. I didn't see the moment that you take it in, examine it, come to the conclusion. And Randy, listen, whenever I act with Randy, he always says to me, flatline, and I want to kill him because I'm thinking, okay, what he's saying is I'm overacting. And so I would say that to you. I would say flatline because you're giving it so much that it becomes more about the character of Polonius than the reaction to Ophelia's speech. That's what I'm saying. And we can work on it privately later. But I do want to make it clear for everybody that Polonius is not one note. And you have to find those moments where look, he's Lord Chamberlain, and we can come to the conclusion that it's the stupidest choice that Claudius could have made. And if you're comfortable with that, fine. I'm not comfortable with that. I want to see a human being in Claudius, in Polonius. And that means he has serious moments and then makes foolish mistakes. But I think for me, that description that she gives and that decision to go to the king and the realization that this might lead to suicide or some dire consequences for that prince shows us a sign of Polonius that's different than just a kind of bumbling, energetic, I know everything and that's the way I react to everything. That's all I'm saying. You know, because listen, if we feel about anybody in this play, good, I'm glad he's dead. Boy, have we missed the boat. Every death in this play should grieve us. And that's not saying that some of them aren't deserved, but every murder should always grieve us. Look at the world we're living in. So that's why when we do these plays, that's what's at stake. So even when Hamlet kills Polonius behind that arras, even Hamlet is distraught about it. And for us to believe he's distraught about it, we have to miss Polonius. Something about Polonius that makes us feel sad for him as well as his murder, but for him. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that because I know, but I think I've made my point. And that's all of this, ladies and gentlemen. That's all of it. Listen, no, I can't tell you how much I know how difficult it is to act, and I have had a situation where I've had to act with Randy. And if you think I'm critical, let me tell you, he puts it on the line. You know, and I'll fight it like hell. He'll tell you I'm the worst person to direct, because I fight like hell. But in the end, when he says flatten it, finally now I'm saying it to other actors because I understand the worth of it. So that's that. Anything else about this work? Anything we've done? I think we've kind of covered all bases. Michele, let me just ask you one thing.
Sure.
What did you feel about doing Ophelia?
Well, my first thing was really to try to get, as I was speaking the words, a mental image in my head. And I found that led me to actually make some of the gestures. You know, he took the hand, it wasn't necessarily really conscious. It was as I was picturing it, I was mirroring it, and that's just, you know, something that I did. The second thing I wanted to try to do was to make sure I respected the periods, because that does seem to organize the thoughts in a really, really interesting way. And in particular, for me, it was sort of like the period before that done, he lets me go. It's sort of like, you know, that it is the end of something, and it's you know, it's hard to understand, but it is you know, a kind of surprise or something that just it happens. And then the third thing was that occasionally there were words that, hopefully without doing too much with them, they seemed so so unusual that they had some kind of, they had to be found in some way, like piteous and profound, loosed out of hell, you know, things like that, where they were not just the normal words, but they as I was trying to find some way to feel like I had chosen those words specifically.
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing about the folio, one of the things I do want to throw in there is that first speech about his doublet all embrace. If you can think of the comma as everything you're saying before it, the only thing you expect to say, and what follows is an after is added on, then it's not a pause. He took me, I'm sorry, I have the wrong, I was on the second one. Just start doing the speech just so I can show you, if you have it in front of you.
My lord, as I was sewing in my chamber, Lord Hamlet, with his doublet all embraced, no hat upon his head,
Next idea.
his stockings fouled, ungartered, and
Hang on just a
down-jived.
second. Let me just take you through a little bit.
Okay.
Here's the problem I'm having. His stockings fouled, and now I'm putting in more punctuation. That you don't have to do that. Be careful of that, because it's the whole thought. The folio only works, by the way, if you have a capital, then and everything else is normal spelling, you got to go back to normal. You can't introduce, this is just in working on the folio. Later on, of course, when you're acting it, who cares? I mean, you know, it's not, hopefully you've gotten what you had to get. But I think when you're examining it, do what's in front of that comma as a thought, then add the next thought. Then remember, I don't know if the whole hamburger exercise, I like a burger and some fries. So I'm not thinking of the fries. The burger has been ordered. I'd like a burger and some fries. It's an afterthought, and that will help keep it present. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's just for everybody. That's a quick use of comma, because then it doesn't slow down. I think one of the things about it, when she says, "My Lord, I've been so affrighted," by what in the name of heaven? Lord Hamlet, his doublet all embraced, no hat upon his head. And, you know, and then I add to it, and I add to it, and I add to it. That, I think, will help create for you the fear.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, time to move on. And I know that this is totally unexpected. Do I have time to do it? Yeah. I'd like to move on, if you're willing, to Voltimand coming in. The reason is that it's that when we start the Polonius and a discussion about the letter, the Ophelia's love and all of that, and Hamlet's lunacy caused by it, that section is going to take time, but it's also its own thing. This Voltimand section seems to be its own thing too. I don't think it's going to warrant the kind of discussion that we've just had about everything else. So what I'd like to do, at least here, is to read it. Okay? And so I think, Randy, would you do Polonius? And Nick, you'll do Voltimand, right? And who haven't I? Polonius, who else? We have the Queen, right? Sharon? Okay. Voltimand, the Queen, Polonius, and Claudius. Did I pick a Claudius? Liz, take Claudius, save me.
Okay, I don't know where we are. As usual, I've got my pages in a complete mess. Like, this is just terrible. Where do we begin? We begin with
the ambassadors from Norway.
Oh, my good Lord.
The ambassadors from Norway. All my pages numbered, but they've got, nevertheless. All right.
Ready?
As far as I can do, yes.
The ambassadors from Norway, my good lord, are joyfully returned.
Thou still hast been the father of good news.
Oh, have I, my lord? Assure you, my good liege, I hold my duty as I hold my soul, both to my God, one to my gracious king. And I do think, or else this brain of mine hunts not the trail of policy so sure as I have used to do, that I have found the very cause of Hamlet's lunacy.
Oh, speak of that. That I do long to hear.
Ah, give first admittance to the ambassadors. My news shall be the fruits to that great feast.
Thyself do grace to them, and bring them in. He tells me, my sweet queen, that he hath found the head and source of all your son's distemper.
I doubt it is no other but the main, his father's death and our or hasty marriage.
Well, we shall sift him. Welcome, good friends. Say, Voltimand, what from our brother Norway?
Most fair return of greetings and desires. Upon our first, he sent out to suppress his nephew's levies, which to him appeared to be a preparation against the Polack. But better looked into, he truly found it was against your highness, whereat grieved, that so his sickness, age, and impotence was falsely borne in hand, sends out arrests on Fortinbras, which he, in brief, obeys, receives rebuke from Norway, and in fine makes vow before his uncle never more to give the assay of arms against your majesty. Whereon old Norway, overcome with joy, gives him 3,000 crowns in annual fee, and his commission to employ those soldiers so levied as before against the Polack, with an entreaty herein further shown, that it might please you to give quiet pass through your dominions for his enterprise, on such regards of safety and allowance are therein set down.
It likes us well. And at our more considered time, we'll read, answer, and think upon this business. Meanwhile, we thank you for your well-took labor. Go to your rest. At night, we'll feast together. Most welcome home.
Yeah. Good. So that's that little section. I think you could hear right from the beginning that when Polonius comes in to say the ambassadors of Norway have come in, and adds to that Hamlet's discovery of Hamlet's lunacy, what is Claudius more excited about hearing? You know, that he wants him to he'll put Norway off forever if we can get to the cause of Hamlet's lunacy. So that again is revealed in that moment. The other thing I think that's revealed is what I said earlier, is that Gertrude says that I don't think it's anything other than his father's death and our hasty marriage. But Claudius says we shall sift him. Claudius now is breaching with Gertrude. For the first time, he's going to now not reject in any major way, but he is going to override her by saying, I think it may be something else. We will sift him. We will move ahead with finding out what Polonius knows. It also sets up for us, by the way, what's coming. If you remember, and we'll get to this, I don't know, by Christmas or whenever, but if you remember that Gertrude is going to become quite annoyed with Polonius in the scene that's the next scene that's coming up, because she says more matter and less art. And then she interrupts. Did this come from Hamlet? You know, she's very short with Polonius. This, I think, is maybe where it starts. I don't think it's anything other than his father's death and our hasty marriage. Well, we shall sift him. That's a decision now Claudius has made, not in league with Gertrude. They're on a different, again, not a major thing, just something to pay a little attention to. Now let's take a look at Voltimand. What's happening with that speech? I always feel that the Voltimand speech is as difficult as the Horatio speech in the first scene.
Yeah.
However, they also both are about Norway and Fortinbras, and if you remember at the end of this play, it's Fortinbras who Hamlet gives him his voice. So Fortinbras will probably become king of Denmark. So the introduction of Fortinbras is important, but the journey is important too. What we've learned in that first, and I think maybe next week, Randy, we'll take a look at, Randy had suggested we go back to the Horatio speech, or go back even to Claudius's speech, anything that reflects on Fortinbras that we could bring us to this, because this is the conclusion of what was started there. But basically, what is being said? I mean, basically, obviously.
It was going to be an
Essentially.
attack, and it was resolved because the old guy sent a message to his nephew, and his nephew obeyed him. But now he wants to pass his army through Denmark.
Yes.
Yes. And look at, now remember that Norway's uncle to Fortinbras. Claudius is uncle to Hamlet. Look at how Norway deals with his nephew. Not only does he's annoyed at first to think that Fortinbras would do such a thing, but in the end, he rewards him. And then he says, you know what, you can take this money and I'll give you permission to go and invade Poland, go start a war with Poland. Leave Denmark alone. And then he asks for permission to go through Denmark to get to Poland. Claudius wants to get on to Hamlet. He is not going to deal with anything that Voltimand says other than it's done. And we'll feast together, we'll take care of it, we'll feast together later on. No questions, no further interrogation. There's nothing that he reacts to in this speech, even that Fortinbras is going to have permission to, or asking permission to go through Denmark, even though we've learned that we've put up this watch because Fortinbras was going to attack Denmark. Well, sure, let him go through. No problem there. We trust him now. But there's nothing. He doesn't flesh it out at all. And I would say to you, he doesn't, because what he says to Polonius, oh, I want to hear about that. And look at how he ends this. This business is very well done. He thinks, okay, wrapped up, and we'll drink later, because he wants to get on to the thing that means much more to him than the invasion of his own country, or any kind of enemy, or anything political, anything that we were so worried about in the beginning of the play. There's not one word that he says to Voltimand other than go take your rest and we'll have a feast. Go ahead, Nick.
But Claudius he's aware of, right? Because he says it at the beginning.
That what?
Of Fortinbras and the potential
danger.
Oh, yes.
So it's just overexcitement for.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding where we are.
Look, that you're saying that he wants to just get on with what Polonius has to say about Hamlet. That it's just, and that surpasses any danger.
What I'm saying that he thinks. And what you're saying is he brought good, and he knows that it's good news because Polonius has said it's good news. Is that what you're saying?
Or that he's thinking that what Voltimand is saying is like, yeah, that's fine. Okay, great, go. And that it's, even then, there's still not danger, I guess is my question. That there's still not, that Fortinbras is going to pass through Denmark, they're going to let him, and that Claudius isn't thinking that there's still danger, possible danger.
I'm not asking that of Claude. All I'm saying is that so much was riding on this meeting of Voltimand sending this message to Norway, and that Norway has put an end to it. And then we talk about his attack on Poland, and then we talk about going through Denmark. All I'm saying, as somebody who was so concerned in the beginning, there's no question, there's nothing other than Voltimand reporting and Claudius saying, go to your rests and we'll have a drink later, we'll have a feast later. That there's not, I mean, you can't flesh a lot out of it, but my point is you have to keep his energy going to the thing that's more important to him, and that is Hamlet.
Yeah.
you know? So whatever Voltmont says, it's accepted, it's great news, it's good, and we'll take care of that later. No questions. There's nothing that says anything further than great. Now you may say to me, what else does he need to know? But again, look at our own politics. People are having meetings all the time, even after the war is over or after the hostages are released. We still have another meeting coming up because there's misdoubt. Because it's important. It's an important thing that your country has been threatened in some way. But this has been made to be just simply accepted for the good news that it is. I'm not denying the good news, but that's it. Go to your rests and we'll feast. He doesn't say, we'll celebrate this. That's it. So all I'm saying, Nick, is Claudius's energy is more about getting to Hamlet than it is any kind of problem with Norway. That's all. It's maybe I'm making too much of it, but again, I always find that this whole speech comes out and the king doesn't say anything other than great. Now you may say to me, well, what else do you want him to say? Well, I want him to ask questions about him coming through Denmark. I'd like him to ask questions, but he doesn't. That's my only point,
Yeah.
And sometimes I make a big point of everything because I don't want to overlook it. And then, next week I'll come back and say, okay, maybe it's no big deal, but I've planted a seed, haven't I?
But it's there, if I may, it's there for a purpose. The purpose is news. A messenger arriving with news would have been a big thing. Shakespeare's stage, that's how they get, it's our breaking news. This is what happens. And you're expecting, so Shakespeare puts this in, breaking news, and he puts it in deliberately for the king to ignore it and go, yes, but get back to the important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Good one, then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, also, wasn't this like one of the big reasons they got married?
That's right. The first court scene.
That's right.
Right. And now he's like, yeah, great. Lovely.
Yep.
Moving on. So
yeah, go ahead.
What does I'm wondering, before we get to Polonius, what's going through Gertrude's mind of, I'm so sorry, did you just say we're going to talk about it later and we're going to have a drink? That's it? Okay.
Well, again, I don't know.
I don't either. I just think it's interesting that she also doesn't say anything.
Yes.
Even in response to her own husband, if this was one of the main reasons they got married in such a hurry.
But this is where we have to be on our feet. There's a wonderful book that was written, I forgot the author's name, but it's called Shakespeare's Silences. And it's about what's not spoken. Because even though it's not spoken, there's got to be a reaction somehow. There's got to be, you don't just stand there like a dead post. You're in the scene. And actually, I have to say, one of the things that they point out is Merchant of Venice. At the end of Merchant of Venice, and the lovers go off, and everything is over. The silence is that Antonio's left on stage alone, and he goes off after them. But that silence, that nothing is said to him in that. So silences are quite powerful. I don't know that this is going to be a major Gertrude's silence moment. But all I'm saying is, we just don't know until we're on our feet exactly how everybody in the scene reacts, So good. So next week, I do think that we should look at the Fortinbras, anything that mentions Fortinbras.
Okay.
Again, connect all of it to bringing back this news.
Yep.
And here's another thing I think, Ben, that to take a look at, and that is our expectations are high. We want to hear Polonius tell Claudius about Hamlet's lunacy, and it's interrupted with this Voltmont. I'm just from an audience perspective. The other thing I want to do next week is to read the whole thing. It's the end of our 4 weeks. And so I'd like to read from Reynaldo and Polonius to this section, to the Voltimand, because when we start the next section, it's Randy and I and Nathan actually talked about the holidays are coming. And so we have to see how schedules are affected by that. But this is the longest scene in Shakespeare's play. And so to break it, it's tough to find a breaking point. And I think Nathan is probably going to contact people to talk about maybe not taking a break on that Tuesday between the four segments. But Nathan, I'll leave that to you in our discussion of how to work that out. It's very hard. You lose continuity because all of this is connected. Because it's so long, we can't always go back and do all that section and then, explore. We have the players coming up. We have the scene, Polonius talking about Hamlet's madness. We have Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
the problem becomes it's one whole day that begins with Polonius and Reynaldo, goes all the way through the play within a play, all the way to Hamlet facing off with his uncle. Yeah. So that's one whole chunk of day and night events, or early morning events.
Yeah.
And that's a large action, biggest action of the play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, Robert, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah. An interesting note that, so we start that Voltimand scene, the very cause of Hamlet's lunacy. And it's allegedly there was asylum tourism at the same time. So in 1600, it was a sport. 100,000 people a year would pay a penny each to go to Bedlam to see lunatics. So somewhat, a penny is what the groundlings are playing. So there's an element of like, bring on the madness. We want to see this. The other thing that's interesting, if we look at Voltimand, the last thing that the Claudius wants to do is talk about internal politics with an ambassador. And what we need to understand with Voltimand, essentially it's a ceasefire. He's just told that there's been a ceasefire. What's going in his head is that the traditional passing of the crown is to the son. However, it hasn't happened that way. And maybe because Denmark, you can also elect a king, but certainly that is an element. If Fortinbras comes, if the son isn't dealt with, Hamlet's not dealt with, and Hamlet is up to something besides lunacy, and then teams up with Fortinbras, which would not be unusual in any stretch of diplomacy or warfare or ceasefire, then Claudius has trouble. And so the trouble at hand is Hamlet. Deal with Hamlet first.
Bob, I think we have to, that's why in our next session, we're going to go back to the first scene on the battlements, where Horatio describes the situation, as well as the court scene in which this is discussed, just to see how this plot line develops. But we'll do that in our next session, right, Annie?
Yes, we will. And I think that, again, this goes back to what Ben was saying and what Bob is saying. Hamlet is the problem, but it's the tragedy of Hamlet. So Hamlet is the focus for certainly Claudius, eventually Gertrude, everybody is focused on Hamlet. And when you're talking about lunacy, if you read The Anatomy of Melancholy, you start to find that everybody in this play starts to put Hamlet's melancholy or antic disposition up against various causes of melancholy. And that's why Rosencrantz and Guildenstern will say it's ambition. That's why Polonius will say it's love. Everyone is doing their own psychiatric examination now of Hamlet. Okay, but we have to move on. So take it, Nathan. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, this is great. More great discussion, and I love some of the basic acting points that kind of come up today. That backstory and history can all be great, but what do we act in the scene? What can we actually use in the scene? Even the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern history is really fascinating, but how do we play that? How do we use that? Or as It's again just a very fundamental concept of, well, how does the character change even in one scene, not necessarily over the course of a play, but just in one scene. What do they learn? What do they take in? And I think some of the other, again, the whole or one of the points of this seems to be generating more and more questions for us to not necessarily answer, but to have of like, yeah, what is Gertrude thinking about this, and how does this character respond to this information? I mean, I think, and everybody's contributions are really wonderful on that front. So I want to thank everybody for their participation and involvement today. It's been another great session. Those watching, definitely keep tuning in. Go back, check out other sessions or rewatch them if you'd like. Like I said before, there are links below if you want to support the project. And hopefully, if we're still going when you watch this and you want to join in, we'd love to have you actually part of being in this room. So that is it. I hope everybody has a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time back in the rehearsal room.
Thanks, everybody. It was a joy again.
Bye.
Bye.